On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
This is Bonjour Chai, the Twin Peaks edition. I'm Avi Feingold, and I'm here with Phoebe Maltzbovy and special guest Zach Kauffman. We are your Frozen Chosen. On this week's show, we talk about the two anti-Semitism conferences this week, one by the ADL and a summit convened by the Canadian government. What is their purpose and value? And are we making mountains out of molehills? Phoebe, how are you?
All right. How are you doing, Avi?
Doing all right. Zach is here with us.
Hi, Zach.
Hello, old friends.
Hello. How's it going?
Just peachy keen over here.
We are going to talk about...
Can we introduce who Zach is, please?
Zach is our producer. Everybody knows who Zach is.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I used to produce Bonjour Chai. You should all tune in to the other show I produce, the CJN Daily. Great show also. So many great offerings at the CJN.
Thank you, Zach.
We are going to talk about two very important things that have happened this week. One that happened already and one that is happening today as we record.
Are we going to talk about two large things?
Yes. Anti-Semitism summits. Both of them summits. We are going to climb the mountains of this. Let me preface this by saying, you know, this to me goes back to early January when the head of the ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt, testified before Knesset. All right. He admits that there are failures in their mission to fight anti-Semitism. So one might assume that there is a bold rethinking of their missions and their tactics. And yet this week, the ADL held their Face It conference on fighting anti-Semitism. Judging from the live streams of the sessions that I watched, business as usual. Doesn't seem like much has changed. And while the sessions are closed today to the public for the Canadian Summit on Anti-Semitism, it doesn't seem like it's that much different from the previous ones that have been held. So I want to get into that. But one of the things that Jonathan Greenblatt was really into is content creators and influencers and TikTok. He had this to say at the Knesset where he says capturing TikTok might seem less meaningful than holding on to Mount Hermon. Libelous tweets certainly might seem less deadly than missiles from Yemen, but this is urgent because the next war will be decided based on how Israel and its allies perform online as much as offline. The focus on content creators really took a leap forward this week when I came across a video from some content creators.
We're Jewish women with big racks. Of course we're at an anti-Semitism conference.
We're Jewish women with big racks. We use our assets to combat anti-Semitism.
We're Jewish women with big racks. Of course we're the real freedom fighters.
We're Jewish women with big racks. Of course people keep coming up to us to ask us for pictures to thank us for our advocacy.
We're Jewish women with big racks, and I'm at this conference in hopes of finding my husband.
Phoebe, what do you make of this?
Well, it falls within a tradition. I'm thinking about when there was that lady who was going around at a pro-Israel protest hoping to find her husband. Remember?
Yes.
So it does fall within that tradition as well. There are a lot of things I've noticed. Probably the first was there's a kind of barely covering bust orange off sort of one shoulder shirt situation happening. And I believe the orange is in tribute to dead
Possibly.
Redheaded babies, which is this is going to be like, what? I don't know. I find this concerning and strange, but also very much of this moment. Zach, you had some theories about this video, and that's what we brought you on to talk about.
Well,
please.
Before I get to my theories, I actually, Avi sent this video to us, and he seemed very vexed. He seemed activated by it. It seemed there was something about it that, really got to you, that either offended your sensibilities or skeeved you out about it. Is that right?
Not skeeved out. I was just like, okay, so women are using their breasts to fight anti-Semitism. And not
they're whacking it.
And not by hitting people with them. I don't know. It just seemed shallow. It seemed weird.
Well, let me back. What's wrong with having big breasts? Would be what is are you offended by seeing? women with big breasts? Like what?
I am not. I'm aware of the existence of
buxom women
sites where we're going to talk to fans of their buxomness.
On today's Bonjour High, we introduce Avi to the concept of the buxom woman.
But there's something that disturbed you about it.
No, not disturbed. I just thought it was like what the heck? Like, what's going on here?
Is it the problem? Okay, so is the problem, let's try to pick this apart. Is it that it's lowbrow? Is it that it's lowest common denominator? Is it that it's feminine coded? So like last week, we talked about the Kahanist or not influencer who had definitively posted a bikini shot of herself, calling it a Zionist thirst trap. Mm-hmm. She is not a buxom woman particularly, but there definitely is this existence of influencers being political and being both sort of feminine, hyper feminine, one might say, and political. And you can agree or disagree with their politics. And given that they have all different politics, we will probably all agree with some of their politics and disagree with some of the other ones' politics. You know what I'm saying? But like, is it that they are unserious people because they are presenting it in this way?
I don't know anything about these women, so I'm not going to say that they are unserious. I guess I was asking myself the question of, can you fight anti-Semitism with anything possible? Can you fight anti-Semitism with makeup? Can you fight anti-Semitism with pizza? Can you fight anti-Semitism with softcore pornography?
I sure hope so.
I mean, like, that's what I'm trying, like, I'm looking
well,
around.
That's what
is the pizza in the pornography? Is it being delivered? Is what you're
perhaps, yes.
Yeah. I'm thinking about if you've ever seen these pictures of like sexy soldiers promoting pride in the IDF, promoting pride in Israel, but they're often like sexy IDF ladies with big guns.
They're often the sexy men.
And sexy men.
Yes.
But there's something about using sexuality in that way. But so they keep saying, we're women with big racks. And of course, we're at an anti-Semitism conference. And so I think that they're reacting to something or like responding to you might think that this wouldn't be a place for women with big racks.
Who is the straw man who doesn't think that there would be a large busted woman at an anti-Semitism
at the ADL conference?
Yeah. Have these people not worked in Jewish nonprofits? Like what bill do they imagine? The Zoftig woman has a long history of...
Well, that's what I'm wondering if they're reacting against this idea that if you talk about anti-Semitism or if you talk about racism in general, that... you're a liberal scold, I'm beyond the binary and whatever. And they're being like, no, actually, you can be a sexy woman and be talking about anti-racism things.
I think there's something to that, but you made another point when we were discussing this offline that I think, which is about the sort of right-wing embrace of sort of the red-blooded heterosexual male urges, right? And I wanted to talk a little bit about where this fits with that, because last week when Avi and I were talking about the influencer in the Zionist bikini, I was trying to explain, like, yeah, she does consider herself an Orthodox Jew. She considers herself a pro-Trump Orthodox Jew. Why is she in a bikini? Why is she not more conservatively dressed if she's so conservative? Well, because these days the conservative thing is this kind of girls are girls and men are men sort of approach, and it fits with that.
Well, what's interesting to me about it is it's not like classical ideas of femininity going back to like 1900. It's like the gender norms that it's reflecting is like Baywatch or like Las Vegas of the 70s.
Sydney Sweeney being the kind
of
the actress.
I don't know who that is, but
this is an actress who I believe there was some right-wing commentator who was saying something about that, like that this is the end. This shows that wokeness is done because now attractive blonde women with large breasts are in style again. And people were like, did they ever go out of style? Whatever. But I think there is something to the fact that there were a number of years where like Victoria's Secret got rid of the angels in favor of like having, I believe it was, I'm not up enough on who people are, but professional soccer player who is a lesbian and not a feminine presenting lesbian was like instead, so there was this kind of idea that beauty standards of the kind of conventional, like big busted young woman sort were passe. we're past it. Well, so that is the other piece, though, that I want to put a pin in that, because I do want to talk about that aspect too. But there is something, I think, where if fighting anti-Semitism has, as I've been saying for a while, become a kind of right-wing coded activity, that it makes sense that there'd be kind of aesthetics in line with right-wing coded things, if that makes sense. This, despite, as I keep reminding, the fact that most American Jews are still Democrats, not Republicans.
In terms of what we started on this, in terms of red-blooded Americans, this is of a piece a little bit with the idea that we shouldn't shame young men for being into traditionally masculine things. We shouldn't shame young men for not being able to sit at a desk all day or liking big breasts, that these are natural urges. And if women want to be women, and the way forward is actually going to be stepping back to some sort of gender norms from the 70s and 80s.
And the irony of ironies, one of them is Canadian.
Yep.
I'm glad you're bringing up their identity, because I looked up these two women. And one of them is a proud, as she writes on her social media, Canadian pizza bagel. So I guess she is half Italian, half Jewish. They are both members of a site, or have profiles on a site called Fanfics, which is sort of an OnlyFans light that is known for being non-explicit. So that's important to put out there. But I do believe that the purpose of the site like Fanfics or like OnlyFans or any of these other pieces of social media are that you get exclusive content where you see these women, but you also have exclusive access to these women for a certain amount of money every month. You get to message them, they will message you back, and you get to talk to them. What's going on here is not that they are using their bodies to like fight anti-Semitism. They're using the ADL to raise their own profiles on social media. Right?
But why is it one? Why not both? Why do you say that it's one or the other?
It's not.
These are young people looking to make an income, and
would the ADL be really happy if somebody was like at their conference and touting their new product that was being sold, like their laundry detergent that was better than anybody else's, and they were trying to sell it? And said, effectively, what you just said.
But you just said that they explicitly want social media to be a weapon in the propaganda war or whatever.
Well, the ADL does, correct?
Right? Because Avi, I think you're talking about a kind of purism, like these are influencers. They want influencers, that these be influencers. That's what they are, right? Yeah. So if they say, okay, well, we want influencers, we want to have influence, but we're only going to have somebody who's, a Jewish studies professor who, whatever. Like, I don't think that that's really going to
cut it.
No. But I do see another vibe shift in the fact that, like, just to talk about the Zoftig thing, there is a time really, really recently when women of a build similar to these women, and I'm allowing myself to speak of people's bodies because that is the topic, is the bodies, right, would have been describing themselves in terms of body positivity. It's interesting that they are now presenting it as about their busts specifically, because it's not that these are big busted women. These are just big all around women, right? Like they're larger women, which is fine. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying it's interesting that they are talking about this in terms of their breasts, because that is really in keeping very much with this conservative ethos and like what they're choosing to foreground, as it were, here.
I mean, do you guys agree that they're sort of reacting to an assumption that big busted women wouldn't be at an anti-Semitism conference?
No, I don't think that that's it at all, because I think the assumption is that a woman would not be showcasing her large bust. I think, again, if you've ever worked at Jewish nonprofits, if you've ever worked in any office, there are women and men of all builds.
Shapes and sizes.
Yeah, people come in all shapes and sizes. And what's maybe unexpected is that this would be like discussed, showcased in that way, right? Like that you wouldn't be sort of wearing an outfit to not showcase that too much. Because, like it's Trumpian, basically, whatever their politics are, it is MAGA aesthetics.
Yeah, I think of course we're this and of course we're at that is part of that meme of saying these things where it's not like anybody was thinking the opposite. They're just trying to like get themselves out there and using this video. If you're saying that the ADL wants porn adjacent or vaguely sexual influencers or explicitly sexual influencers to be proudly pushing
how did they become Avi? Like before we get into trouble on this, they are not explicitly sexual influencers. I think you are rounding
I
this
didn't say
to
they are.
something.
Well,
Okay.
hold on.
It sounds like their online personalities lean into the erotic.
Correct.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't have a problem with saying that. This is who they are.
But I
They're
think there's a
trying-
limit to what we actually know here, and I just want to be
They're selling
mindful of
from
that.
from $6 to $20 to plus dollars a month. They are
Well, who knows? Who
access
knows
to
what
them.
they're selling?
I'm on their thing. I'm on Fanfix looking at their profile.
Okay. So what's your point?
I'm saying that what you're trying to get at is the ADL wants these people out there in the world saying, hey, I'm here, I'm selling erotic content, and I'm fighting anti-Semitism at the same time. And that's going to be one of the new ways in which we're fighting anti-Semitism.
Avi, we need to talk about just like what erotic content is in a sort of big sense. Like,
Phoebe, are there Jewish porn stars?
Of course.
I think
Of course,
everybody knows
yes.
that there are Jewish porn stars. Am I personally expert in this? No.
And yet the ADL wouldn't necessarily honor these, like giving them their like social media award for saying, hey, let's fight anti-Semitism. I don't think they want porn stars fighting anti-Semitism. Maybe they do. I don't know.
Okay,
It just seems
but
like
these
it's
women
not,
are not porn stars.
They are not.
Let's
I'm sure
let's
that's what I'm trying to
let's
get
just say
at.
that.
I think
I am
Avi is
literally
committed to the
trying to
idea that they are
understand.
porn star adjacent.
They are porn star adjacent. Yes. They are selling access
And
to
I
themselves
think I
in an
would
explicit manner.
possibly-
I'm not judging them for that. I'm not stigmatizing them for that. That's fine. That is what a
So
lot
do
of
you
young
think the
people do.
ADL should not be doing that?
I don't know what the ADL is doing. I'm asking, does the ADL know about this and do they care? And they say, yes, you know what? We want explicit adjacent social influencers, and that's the future of fighting anti-Semitism.
It would not be in their interest to be like, we're going to have a closed tent. We're going to be the place that polices how you can show your body or how you make money.
So what should, here's as good a place as any to maybe switch over to the topic of how to fight anti-Semitism.
Yeah, so that to me is much more of the question and the issue of what's going on. So that leads us to the larger topic of this conference and this summit. Let's get to that right after the break.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
Back in January, Greenblatt, the head of the ADL, was, as we said, at the Knesset, and he gives this quote where he says, you know, if we're not changing the way we do things and admitting that we have failed, and he talks about he comes from the tech sector and he believes in failing forward. And he says, otherwise, if we don't do that, as Einstein said, we'll be doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Right? He says it's the definition of insanity. So starting with the ADL and the rest of the NGO sector in the US and around the world, we have got to start doing things differently. He says that quote almost verbatim at the beginning of this conference. And yet, if you look at the content of this conference and you look at the summit that's happening this week, it seems like business as usual. It doesn't seem like there is that much different that is happening at this conference than any of the fights against anti-Semitism that has been happening over the past decade plus from the ADL. So I start asking myself, what is the value of having this conference? What is the value of having conferences in general fighting anti-Semitism?
So I guess the question that we're sort of talking about, and Zach, you should share your thoughts as well, is there's still anti-Semitism, right? There's been all this fight against anti-Semitism, this whole movement to fight anti-Semitism in their latest incarnation of it before October 7th, right? There were all sorts of things like Barry Weiss's book about how to fight anti-Semitism. I reviewed it for JTA before I worked at the Canadian Jewish News, like this was a long time ago. Like, yet anti-Semitism exists, is arguably a larger issue. So is there an effective way to fight anti-Semitism? There's certainly various apparatuses, whatever, of attempts at fighting anti-Semitism, but do they do anything? And then there's another question, which Avi, I think you have a lot of stuff to say on, which is there a better use of Jews' time than fighting anti-Semitism that would be more strengthening to the Jewish people, the Jewish community, Judaism, whatever, than fighting anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I think that especially in the Canadian context. So like we mentioned today, as we're speaking, there's this federal government organized forum on anti-Semitism, and that the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs has actually surprisingly been less sort of gung-ho excited about than I might have expected. Of course, they're supportive of it, but in recent months and weeks, they've been much more likely to say, we're only supportive of this conference in so far as it creates action. And I think that there is a feeling among a lot of Canadian Jews that they hear a lot of speeches, rhetoric, nice words saying, there's no room for this in our country, whatever. And they're like, we don't need more words. We don't need more panels. We don't need more committees. We need action.
Okay, so first of all, Zach, I want to point out the elephant in the room of what you just said, which is one of the reasons why CIJA is really parav on this summit is that this summit has become politicized and CIJA has become politicized. And who was not invited to this conference? Most conservative, I think virtually all members of the Conservative Party were not invited. This is a liberal-driven event. And CIJA, it's pretty blatant at this point, is kind of anti-liberal and pro the Conservative Party. And so, of course, they're going to be like, well, we can't be against an anti-Semitism conference, but they're going to have an arm's length to it because in their minds, nothing that the Liberal Party can do actually has any good.
Possibly. They claim to be nonpartisan. Do with that what you will. Like, you can always say, what's the point of what you're doing? You could go to a protester in the street and say, like, what, you really think you're going to stop climate change by being out here? Oh, you really think you're going to the climate conference is going to do something? What is it going to do? It's just talk. And it's not always obvious in that moment or to the participant exactly what the outcome is going to be down the line for these things, for these conferences. Who knows? There's speeches, there's palling around, and people could be having a drink together and have a great idea. Sort of all people who care about the same thing coming together and talking about it. Are they going to change the world? Maybe not, but I don't think that that is the prerequisite for doing anything. And like, there's this big call to do something. People are like, why isn't the government doing anything? Why are our institutions not doing anything? Someone has to do something. But there's not like a silver bullet to solve this problem. People want them to do something that is more than words, but I don't know if that thing exists. So all they can do is like, okay, let's get together. Well,
I was going to say, that does kind of lead a bit into the points I wanted to make about this, which is there's value, I think, in the fact that we live in a society that thinks to do this, that thinks of anti-Semitism as enough of a problem to organize a summit about it. And I think for a long time, until very recently, until both post-October 7th and post-Trump re-election, there was the sense that, well, everybody just agrees anti-Semitism is bad. Surely everybody, except for some fringe extremists, agrees that, right? I don't think this is something that can be as taken for granted these days, that that's how everybody feels. Jews feel that way. Jews differ on how to define anti-Semitism for sure. But as cringe as I myself have been known to find things like an anti-Semitism summit, I'm glad that people are free to organize against hate, even if I don't think their strategies are necessarily effective, even if I think the strategies are sometimes counterproductive. There is something reassuring in living in the kind of society where people are free to do that.
Look, is there still racism in society? Is there still homophobia in society? Is there still sexism in society? All of them. I don't think they will go away. I think
there's no more sexism, though. That one was solved when Hillary Clinton became president.
Hatred will not. My point is, when you say, Zach, that what are the effective strategies? What are to do? There are many think tanks. There are many researchers that have looked and said, what are the more effective and less effective strategies that are usable against combating hate? I look this up. There is so much stuff about face-to-face interaction, about the nature of the types of education that happens. There is discussions around media, around policy. And at the end of the day, I think all of those things are being implemented. It's just that, as you said, Zach, it's messy. It's not so easy to go and get rid of this stuff. And at the end of the day, also to recognize that if it's not going away, sometimes you have to develop a thicker skin, right? I think gay people had to deal with homophobia for a very long time, and don't go and, say, hey, I've had a homophobia against me. I've had a homophobia against me. I've had a racism against me. They learn to figure out that it's not going away, and that by pointing everything out every single time, it's a problem. You think
people of other groups apart from Jews do not point out microaggressions?
Oh, they do. But they also, I think, learn to recognize that it's not going away, and it's, saying that microaggressions are bad doesn't mean that microaggressions go away. There's an awareness. As I said, it takes time. Hate crimes get prosecuted from across the spectrum of things, and the government does that. So when you have a summit gathering police leaders and gathering government officials saying you have to prosecute, they're already doing that.
The thing that I was taking from what you're saying at the base is that, you think these conferences are sort of silly. That they're not doing anything.
Correct.
It's just
it's patting each other on the back. It's literally giving each other awards. That's what they did at the ADL. They had an award ceremony for the people fighting anti-Semitism. Yay, you.
And they had all these celebrities. They had Gal Gadot. They had David Schwimmer. They had all of these people go up on stage and talk about why they support this cause. And you think it's a little bit silly.
I do.
Okay. But I would say any affinity group gets together and talks about what the causes are concerning them, whether it's women in the workplace, trans acceptability.
I was once in a women. I worked at a workplace that did not have many women and was sort of like a very, I don't want to go into specific, very masculine.
Was it Bonjour Chai?
It could have been, but it wasn't, because I was going to say it was women of that organization. And it's me in this context, so it would be me sitting by myself talking about it. A slightly less masculine environment than Bonjour Chai. And yes, I remember the women groups. I don't know that much came of it, but we had coffee and chatted. But yes, I think this is true. This is not unique to Jews doing this. Whether it's getting anywhere or not, I mean, I think they're not to bring this back again for the 1,000th time to DEI type topics, but there are people who question whether these things are effective because they want them to be effective and are frustrated that they're not. And then there are people who are questioning whether they're effective because they think bigotry is great and don't like people fighting bigotry, right? So both of these things exist now in the world. Does that make sense at all?
Yes, it does. And I'm looking at it in the same sort of way. And I'm saying, you know what? Maybe it's not effective because it's always going to be there. You are never going to eradicate, right, anti-Semitism. You're never going to eradicate anti-Semitism. There will always be people that will say bad things about Jews.
So, Avi, I think your stronger point is in the then do something else, then build your Judaism in some other way.
I think is your thing. Go fight anti-Semitism. Don't make it the central part of your faith, the central part of your whole life. Go be Jewish and go do your thing. And that's a whole separate topic of what I think is, what can be done. But maybe they're sitting there spinning their wheels and saying, let's fight anti-Semitism. Why isn't this working? Why isn't this working? Because nothing will work. At the end of the day, there will always be this. And the best we can do is remind people again and again, anti-Semitism is bad, right? And so that the majority of people will get there.
For the people attending these conferences, there's an expressive value in being there. There's an expressive value of being at a protest. There's an expressive value with thousands of people in the same room who are going through the same experience that you are. Usually you feel isolated, and this creates senses of community. That doesn't seem like something you can necessarily dismiss wholesale.
That's fine, but don't structure it as we have to do this. We have to fight this. This is 2 days of coming up with the tactics. This is hey, let's just have a conference. Let's not make it the biggest thing in the world. And I don't
understand this. I'm sorry.
I also think that Avi's frustrated by his what you said at the beginning of that the head of ADL said we're going to do more than just talking. We're going to do action.
I see.
And now they're continuing to just do these.
Okay, so this is what it is. There's two types of conferences. Okay, there's, as Zach said, the affinity conferences where everybody gets together and talks like, we're here, we're doing our thing. And then there's professional conferences that gather little to no, media coverage, where it's just, hey, let us get together, figure out the strategies, learn from each other, have professionals. We don't need all of the hangers on and, wannabes and saying, yes, I'm here to fight anti-Semitism. I'm here to fight anti-Semitism. Let's get the professionals in a room, talk about this stuff, develop more effective methods if those things actually exist, and then get out there in the world and do it. Having 4,000 people to just say, rah, 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 we love fighting anti-Semitism, that's a whole different thing. And I think that is, they're trying to put these two things together. It's, I think, silly. I'm not sure either of them really belong, but at the end of the day, you're drawing attention to yourself. You're saying, hey, we're doing this, we're fighting it, but it's not working. That itself is not doing anything, right? And yes, Phoebe, the more important point that I want to be making here is that if your entire identity is your large breasts and fighting anti-Semitism, then I do think that there's
there,
a
Avi.
shallowness. Like, you have to have a strong Judaism, and it doesn't mean religious. It can be cultural. You can have a strong identity as a Jew and not make that this fighting anti-Semitism the central part of it.
The question that I have is, like, if you go to these conferences, are you more likely to walk away feeling affirmed and like, oh, there's all these people around me who are fighting for the same thing? Or are you more likely to walk away feeling like you've just spent 4 days talking about every single terrible anti-Semitic thing, and your sense of being under attack has increased?
That you leave at your Uncle Leo from Seinfeld, where you see anti-Semitism everywhere.
It deepens your discomfort.
But I think that is an interesting point, and I think you would probably be thinking more about anti-Semitism and be more on edge about it. I mean, at the same time, sometimes you do have to say, like, pinpoint what exactly is happening. And like, if there's a hate crime, it could be helpful to say who's being targeted, because otherwise you don't know what you're talking about.
It just frustrates me to no end. I wonder whether we are ever going to get out of this spiral of we have to fight anti-Semitism, why it's rising, it's not effective. And as Zach pointed out, I do think that there is definitely an element of people who fight it all day and professionally fight it will tend to see it in places where you might want to just let it go sometimes, as I said before. And, at some point, our entire stress level as a Jewish community is raised higher and higher and higher because of this. And we just really need to lower the tone. We need to de-stress. We need to get out of this spiral of saying, this is the worst thing ever. This is the worst era ever.
This is very meta because you're very freaked out about the conference.
Yeah, but I know that I'm in a half hour, I'm going to leave and I'm done.
Yeah. Avi, I hear everything you're saying, but sort of, you're a rabbi. Mm-hmm. You understand that communities have sort of pastoral needs. Mm-hmm. And whether you think they ought to be or not ought to be, are freaked out and feel like anti-Semitism is rising, and they need to see that people are doing something. Their institutions are in action. That there's someone at the switch, that someone is doing something. How do you telegraph that to them? How do you telegraph, we're working on it, we're trying here?
If I was a rabbi at somebody's bedside and they're very ill, and they're like, Rabbi, I don't know. I feel despair because I'm so sick. I might die. I don't know what to do. My job as a rabbi is not to go and try to become a doctor all of a sudden and to try to solve that problem for them. My job as a rabbi, if you're talking about the pastoral nature of it, and if we're talking about large communal institutions, my job is to be there as a spiritual presence and to say, hey, it could be okay. Look at the bright side. Look at all the things that we have accomplished. Look at who you are as a person. Look at the faith that you have. There's a lot of things that you tell somebody in a pastoral context that is not about raising the hackles and raising their stress level beyond where we're at.
Like, that you can see that the community has a need for this, that they're freaked out and they're saying, like, we are scared, and
my job is to say, don't freak out.
We need some signal from leadership about how this is being solved.
My job as a pastoral individual is to say, don't freak out. Is to say, I understand that you're freaking out. It's okay. But let's try to figure out how to not freak out. That is always going to be my position in a pastoral context. And I don't have a ton of pastoral training. I have like this amount. And for those people who can't see, it's a wee amount. But like, that's where I'm at. Like, we're doing the exact opposite. We're people going to their rabbis and saying, hey, Rabbi, I'm sick. It's horrible. I'm being attacked. And the rabbi's coming to them and saying, you know what? You have every right to be scared. Let's figure out how to get even more scared. Let's figure out how to even get more stressed out. And that's not good. Does that answer?
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah. I think that people are saying demanding action, and you're saying we need to address the need for action in a different way.
A totally different way. And you know why the community does this type of thing and raises the stress level? Because that's how you raise money. Because you raise money based on fear, and you don't raise money based on let's chill out a bit. And I'm sorry to say that statement out loud, but it's true. And it's clear to me that many organizations, not all Jewish organizations do this, but many Jewish organizations absolutely raise money and raise their centrality in the community by creating this culture of fear that it's hard to get out of.
I guess I have more empathy for the organizations who are like, we have all of these shareholders, all of these people sending us emails saying like, we want to see you do something about this.
I'm not telling people, as I said, my job is not to say you're wrong and you don't have any reason to fear. My job is to say you're right. There is fear here. We have to figure out how to get away from that. We have to figure out how to move away. All right, let's wrap there. Let's move on to our nachas. Zach, you're our always behind the scenes, sometimes in front of the scenes. You get to go first. Do you have a nachas? Do you have a broigas? What do you got for us? I
have a little bit of a mix. The other week, I went to this pastry making workshop. We learned to do croissant and Austrian and different French patisserie. It was a full day, and we made different types of laminated doughs, and we learned about different types of pastry making. And so that was really exciting to make different things that I had A, never had the courage to do on my own, and B, had only had in like cafes, and they'd never been very good before, like those palmiers, those elephant ears. Only had really bad ones. They've always been dry and really sad. We made them fresh out of the oven. They were amazing. That's most of my nachas. The nachas broigasy part was the chef who was teaching the class, the workshop, was talking about how croissant in Toronto, he likes them less in North America because they have these huge holes inside. They're very aerated. Have this huge open crumb. And croissants are like enormous here, and they shatter when you break into them. And he was saying that in Paris, croissants are more like bready almost, and you can spread jam on them, and they're not these like baseball sized things. And then I was thinking about it, and I was like, oh, having a really open crumb structure, having a really like a lot of holes in your croissant is like great for Instagram, and having these like really tall, big croissant are great for a display case. And they're sort of North American pastries. I am beginning to wonder if they're maximized for visual consumption as opposed to mouth consumption. And so that has been a thought that has been interesting me and is nachas and broigasy.
Zach, where did you do this class?
Le Dépanneur in Toronto.
Okay, because my husband makes croissants from scratch.
Oh, yeah.
I'm wondering whether he should be taking the class or perhaps teaching it. I think he's more of the French philosophy of it.
Phoebe, do you got a nachas for us?
Yep, and it's going to be a one-word nachas. Zelensky.
Okay, we see where you stand.
What have you got, Avi?
Until yesterday, I had a nachas. Today, I have a double. It's a nachas and a broigas. The nachas that I have is... I was not aware that last year there was a exhibit at the Jewish Museum in Berlin called Sex, Jewish Positions, which is a wonderful title for a conference on Judaism and sexuality. But I managed to get a copy of the catalog that was accompanying the exhibition, and it is fabulous. It is so much art that is related to Jews and sexuality, contemporary and a little older than that. Great essays that I don't know how they fit into the exhibit itself, but accompany the catalog and was great to read. If you can get a copy of this and can get a hold of it, go check it out. It's a wonderful book. I went to what I thought was going to be a wonderful concert last night. Yonatan Razel is a Israeli singer. He is really popular. He has a lot of great songs. He was doing a free concert, and I should have known better than to realize that a free concert sponsored by Nefesh B'Nefesh, which is the organization that sponsors Aliyah to Israel, might have strings attached. There is no such thing as a free concert. And I got to say, it was such a frustrating experience to have this concert punctuated every other song by speeches and propaganda videos for making Aliyah. And I'm all for making Aliyah, but like, it was so heavy-handed. It was so heavy.
Was it like you went to a timeshare sales?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
It was that. And again, that might have been fine in and of itself, if not for the fact that there was so much propaganda. It was make Aliyah. If you go, it's one big Shabbaton. Everybody dances and everybody's singing and everything's great and everybody goes to the kotel and there's only men at the kotel. I don't know why, but there's only videos of men at the kotel. So all of this stuff was really, really painful for me to see. And it was definitely a timeshare concert.
I went to the ADL conference because I saw these women with huge boobs. And then it turned out it was just all propaganda.
Yeah, basically.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you for listening to Bonjour Chai for the week ending March 8th, Shabbat Parshat Tetzaveh. The show is produced by Michael Fraiman, edited by Zach Kauffman. The executive producer for CJN Podcast is Michael Fraiman. Our music is by So-Called. We are a project of the Jewish Living Lab and are distributed by the CJN Podcast Network. You can listen to all our past episodes on our page at thecjn.ca/bonjour, and you can subscribe to the podcast and automatically receive all episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We would love it if you told a friend about Bonjour Chai. It is one of the best ways we get new listeners. As always, you can email us with comments at bonjour@thecjn.ca.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.